Hey everyone, welcome back to Risky Business, a show about making better decisions or freaking the fuck out. I'm Maria Konnikova.
And I'm Nate Silver. This is our first emergency episode, I believe.
This
Pretty
is, this
soon.
is, it is, it is. It's our emergency podcast. You guys heard our voices just yesterday, and we are back again today, Friday, after the presidential elections, because we just could not sleep, literally, in some cases.
After the debate. The elections
Yeah.
are
Oh, yes. Sorry. After,
thankfully
see,
four
this
and a
is
half
this.
months away, which gives
Thankfully,
people
indeed. This is
option
how
value.
fried my brain is. This is how
Yeah.
fried my brain is. I said elections instead of debate. So, Nate, last night we were both watching the debates from opposite coasts. And about, let's see, 20 minutes in, I actually have the timestamp on my phone, 6:20. I texted you since we were not watching it. We were watching it together, but apart. And I'm just going to read my text. I said, this debate is painful. What is even happening? Make it stop. And then I said, we are so fucked. And that is when I knew, Nate, that we had to talk today.
Yeah, and I was getting a lot of texts like that. And, people know, like, I'm busy during debates. I'm probably not going to respond right away. But, like, the degree of
You responded
unanimity.
to me. Thank you.
Yeah, look, you're high priority. The degree of unanimity that I was seeing from different types of Democrats, right? Centrist Democrats and left-wing Democrats and Democrats who had been very mad at me for daring to suggest that having a guy running to be president until he's 86 might be a bad idea and could end badly, and or with a Donald Trump presidency instead. And like, I don't want to criticize people who change their mind in a direction that I think is persuasive, but like among the media / pundit class, you have to be really bad when the incentives are so strong to spin. You have to be really bad to get to a point where even the spinners kind of give up, right? And the term preference cascade is sometimes used where people think something and there's a social stigma to saying it. Well, there's no longer a social stigma to saying that Joe Biden should drop out, right? That's like almost like the not normie Dem voter view, although actually it is actually. I take that back because like if you look at polls, an overwhelming majority of voters and a majority of Democrats, not an overwhelming majority of Democrats, have said that they think Biden is too old to be president, at least for another 4 years. So look, I think this was relative to look, I actually thought about this ahead of time, Maria, because I'm weird like that, right? I thought there was like a 20% chance that I would write a post, which I wrote at Silver Bolton early this morning / late last night,
Yes, you
entitled
did.
Joe Biden Should Drop Out. I thought there was a 20% chance of that, but I thought in that 20% people would be really, really mad at me. And now like everyone loves the post and it's like the conventional wisdom and it's obvious,
Right.
apparently. But
By the
like,
way, you got a lot of shit when you said he should drop out when we were talking about on this podcast about 4 weeks ago, right?
well, I did
Something like that.
let me be
You said
because
he
I
could drop out. We didn't say he should drop out.
he should
We
consider
said he should
dropping out.
consider. Yes.
And then we launched our election model on
Yes.
what day is it even? On Wednesday. And Biden had like a 35% chance of winning that forecast. And that will probably go down maybe quite a bit after the debate. But like at 35% is where I was roughly indifferent. That's a good poker term, right? Although actually we can use that in like regular life. It's like not that weird, but like I was indifferent at 35% between Biden and Mr.
Between calling
Democrat.
and folding, right?
Yeah, between calling and folding. At whatever it is after this debate, it's a fold. It's not even a fucking close fold, right? It's not even. I'm not gonna use a time bank chip thinking about this one any longer. It's not tenable to have. I mean, I'm not sure it's even tenable for him to be president for the next 6 months or whatever, right? I mean, that's a debate we could probably have, right? That might be close. But like, it's not tenable to have someone who wants to be president for another 4.5 years give a performance like that where he obviously shows his age, which is what you'd expect because he's 81 and he wants to be president until he's 86. It's not tenable to have this person continue to run for president, right? Now, people are fucking stupid and stubborn, especially old people, and they may make a bad decision. But like, if you care about like defeating Donald Trump, if you care about the kind of future of the Democratic Party, and if you care about listening to like the voters who have done you the favor of telling you this for a year that like, yeah, hey, common sense, 81 is too old to be president. He wants to be president until he's 86. I'm sorry, but like this is kind of not that close a decision anymore, I don't think. And in some
Yeah,
ways, like I told like I'm rambling. I'm sorry.
it's okay.
Um, I
You're
told
allowed to ramble, and then I'll ramble after you. Please continue.
went to this little social event on Wednesday night and had a good conversation with a woman I hadn't met before, and she was despondent about Biden's performance, and I'm like, well, you should probably root for it to go either really well or really badly, right? Because the muddling through the status quo, 2/3 chance of losing or whatever. I mean, 1/3 isn't that bad, as any poker player knows. But it may have been so bad that it's the thing that saves Democrats from a disaster. Although I still think any other nominee against Trump would also be, in a difficult position. I'm not Pollyanna-ish about, oh, Gavin Newsom waved the wand and now he wins. Like, no, I think Gavin Newsom now or Kamala Harris has a puncher's chance, or maybe more than a puncher's chance, but just, might be below 50%, but above Biden.
Yeah. So a few things. I mean, first of all, like, yes, I think that yesterday was abysmal. I mean, I actually literally was watching at the beginning, like I do horror movies. Like sometimes when something is too grisly, like I shield my face and I don't even realize I'm doing it. And I was doing that yesterday. Like I was sitting on the couch and like at some point I just went like this, I shielded my eyes and I was like, oh my God, this is just, it was painful. Like it was actually physically painful to watch, especially at the beginning. I think he got a little bit better, but he was just struggling so much and you could really see his age. And Trump was making no sense either, but he was confidently making no sense and lying. And the fact that a candidate couldn't beat that, couldn't point out the inconsistency. I was a debater all through school. Like the debater part of me, I was like, I wanted to be like, oh my God, you have to interrupt him here. You have to do this. You have to address this. And then Biden just flubbed his biggest points, abortion. He just suddenly pivoted to immigration. It was just really, really sad, heartbreaking, and also scary. Like I said, I felt like I was watching just this slow motion train wreck horror movie where I didn't even want to see what was happening on screen. Now, what you were saying, kind of the second part of your ramble about, people.
Ramble?
You said you were rambling.
Okay.
You called it a ramble. So I'm just referring back to what you said. It was a very coherent ramble.
Like
I didn't think you were rambling, but then you said I'm rambling. So
it's like when you say, oh, what do you think of, I don't like these new glasses on me, right? You're supposed to say, oh, those look great on you, right? It's like, I'm
all right, Nate. In the second part of your incredibly coherent multi-part speech, by the way, now I'm going to go on a ramble on a tangent and say that every single time that Biden started saying number one, I was like, please don't do it. Please don't do it. You're not going to, we're not going to get to number two. And then he would say like number one again. And I was like, oh no, just please stop doing these lists. This is not good. And other people felt that way as well. But anyhow, what I was going to say is the second part of what you were talking about, kind of this stubbornness. And I've actually seen reactions to people saying, well, it's what will this say about the Democratic Party that they've been like hiding this and blah, blah, blah. No. So let's go back to something we've talked about on this podcast before, which is the sunk cost fallacy. This is probably the single most important sunk cost fallacy that you could face in politics ever, which is that, sunk cost fallacy, to remind our listeners, putting good money after bad, good time after bad, good energy after bad, basically saying that because we haven't done something to this point, or we have done this and we've already invested, we can't change, right? We have to keep going and we have to just continue on the path we're on. Whereas the rational choice might be to say, okay, you know what? I can't change the fact that we didn't replace Biden immediately. I can't change the fact that we didn't convince Biden not to run for a second term and to step down immediately. I can't change the fact that back in September, when we had more time, he didn't step down. What I can change is what I'm doing right now. And that doesn't mean I'm nefarious. That doesn't mean that I've done something stupid, that I've been hiding things. All it means is that the information, the data set has changed. The reality right now isn't the reality of a year ago or 2 years ago, which, as you pointed out in your newsletter, happens because cognitive decline does happen suddenly. And, it's not like it's a very gradual process, and I think we witnessed it yesterday. But what you should say is, okay, this doesn't say anything bad about me. What it says is that I'm smart, that I understand what's happening right now, and that I'm willing to change my mind. And that is a sign of intelligence and savvy. And as you say, having Biden step down is not guaranteeing a Democratic victory, but having him not step down is almost, I mean, not quite, but almost handing the victory to Trump.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, he was at 35% or 33%, whatever, before the debate. The CNN Insta poll of debate watchers had him losing 2-1. This is a poll that Democrats have won every debate that Trump has ever participated in, every debate since the first debate in 2012. That might translate, if you kind of use a back of the envelope formula, into Biden losing another 2 or 3 points in the head-to-head polls against Trump. At that point, he might fall to 20% or something in our model. And 20% is still meaningfully above zero. But look, as you were saying that, Maria, there's two things here. One is that there has been a lot of new information revealed, right? I might have made an inference that I thought Biden wasn't going to handle the debate well, but that was just a guess, right? And now we have actual evidence of it. And we have evidence of Biden's polling being stagnant and Trump maintaining a lead after all this stuff that has happened, like Trump's criminal convictions and the economy getting quite a bit better and voters being more focused on the race. There's also a poker thing, though, where sometimes you have a hand where there isn't new information. However, you have more time to reflect and come to your senses, right? You can have a hand where it's like, well, why'd I call with this hand on the turn if I'm going to fold to the river on a relatively good card for me? And if you plugged it into a solver, it would say you made a mistake. Well, it's because you had more time to think about it on the river. Maybe you're a little bit tilted or something on the turn. Maybe you were distracted. Maybe you're playing poker online. You're multi-tabling, playing more than one table at once. So being able to say, look, I have thought about this more and I'm changing my mind. It's certainly when there's new information, but even when there's not, is also a sign of, I think, judgment and experience and character.
Absolutely. Now, I have a question for you. So historically, and correct me if I'm wrong, I had the sense that debates didn't affect polls that much, right? That kind of the polls don't move that much in the aftermath of a debate. Do we think that that's going to change in this particular case, or do we think that this might still be the case here?
I mean, that much is relative, right? Like nothing has moved the polls more than about a point at a time. If I had to predict, Trump was 1.5 points ahead in our national polling average, which of course national polls don't really count for very much, but it's a reasonable benchmark. 1.5 points ahead in our national polling average. If I had to predict, it might be 3 or 3.5 within a couple of weeks once the higher quality polls are fully priced in. The problem
that's actually pretty substantial.
Yeah, and that's a wild guess. It could be 2, it could be 4. I mean, look. Look. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
It's okay. We're tired.
The problem is that Biden is not in a position where he's ahead and just has to stem the damage, right? And let the floodwaters recede. He's behind, and to come back, and he'll be further behind almost for sure once these polls are incorporated. And, one of the opportunities he thought he had to turn around the campaign was a debate. Now there's only one more debate. And believe me, if Biden could cancel it, he probably would. How is this man supposed to show the dexterity and energy and flexibility to mount a comeback against a guy? I mean, look, whatever you say about Trump, he immediately you can kind of see it on his face, right?
Yeah.
It's like a poker player who realizes that a player on his right is a fucking drunk fish that's going to donate thousands of dollars to the table, and he's going to guaranteed to soak it for the next hour, right? Next hours ahead. Trump knew instantly that Biden was performing terribly and at times was more restrained, or at least was crisp in the delivery and but that's kind of says is Trump still has his political animal instincts intact. And I'm not sure Biden even has that anymore. I mean, he couldn't deliver his canned lines. He couldn't deliver his closing statement. And as you know, when people get older, they can have days. I mean, I don't want to name anyone in particular, but they can have days, maybe half the time, 2/3 of the time, 3/4 of the time, where they act like their old self, or maybe they do in most capacities in their life. But it's not good enough when you're the American president and running to be president for another 4 fucking years. It's just irresponsible. the people in the White House who have not spoken up about this publicly should be shunned from public life, frankly. I mean, seriously, some of them will write, big magazine exposés and get book deals and things like that. They're fucking cowards. If you're in the White House and you think you're a fucking patriot, come fucking forward and tell us what Joe Biden's really like, right? Don't get a fucking book deal in 2 years and then say how much you knew all along. You're a fucking coward if you're not like willing to speak or defend him or say, look, I'm being honest and I'm going to tell you that like it's actually not that bad. That's fine too. But like there's a lot of fucking cowards in the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. So something that you said makes me kind of reflect on a broader point, which is that our decision-making ability, our cognitive capacity isn't equal, right, over time, and you could have good days and bad days. Now, what we saw yesterday was a high-pressure situation, right? Performance under time pressure, performance with the cameras on you, high pressure, like you need to perform, and the thing is, if you're running to be the president of the United States, that's when you need to perform well. You need to perform well under those high pressure situations. I don't give a fuck if you're fine on your off days on the weekend when you have, hours and hours to think about it. I need to know that you're also fine in a crisis situation when the lights are on you, when you have to respond under time pressure, when you have to make hot decisions. I want to know that that's when you shine, that you're not going to choke. And what we saw last night is Biden absolutely choking. And by the way, it also kind of reminded me, back in school in political science class, when you probably watched these clips too of the original Kennedy-Nixon debates where like Nixon just looked horrible on camera, right? And Kennedy just won because he looked so much better. Sorry, you were going to get another debate in there. But no, Biden just looked awful. He just looked like, when you looked at the split screen, he looked lost. He just looked like he didn't know what was happening. He was gaping. He had no presence. And Trump has presence. I mean, I hate Trump. He was lying. There was not a single true word out of his mouth. But as you said, his political instincts were on. He, commanded the camera. He had this Cheshire cat grin, like, yes, I'm about to get all this whale's money right here. Like, keep it coming. And he had the barbs, like I don't know what he said at the end of that last sentence. I don't think he knows either. I mean, those clips are going to go viral, and that's going to really be awful. Well, I said a lot of different things there, but I think they're all relevant.
No, Trump was even more brazen than usual about kind of unapologetically lying, in part because I think he realized that like Biden couldn't fight back, right? I mean, it's what you might call an exploitative strategy in poker is like, I can just keep bluffing because this guy is too weak to calm me down, right? He does not have what it takes today to calm me down. The physical thing, I mean, there have been in advance of the debate, Republican groups circulating unflattering videos of Biden, like looking like he's wandering off or dazed or freezing. And these videos are unflatteringly and kind of selectively edited. So like you'll have these news organizations put out like fact checks and say, okay, well, if you look at the broader context, then Biden was like, there was one where they're in a field at like the G7 summit. Yeah. And for some reason, there were like parachuters. This all sounds very weird. International organizations in Europe is weird, right? So like, of course it's weird. But like, so what'll happen is like the fact checkers will show the full clip in context, which also looks pretty fucking bad, right? It also makes Biden look fucking old and lost. Not as bad as the GOP edited special director's cut version, but the GOP fucking knows because they seem to care about winning more than Democrats do. They know that like you're going to have this double hit with these videos where the edited version and all the fucking precious fact checkers dutifully show the real version, which is also fucking bad for Biden because he's fucking 81 years old and he's clearly diminished. He is maybe above average for an 81-year-old, but he is very much diminished. I mean, what really freaked me out about Biden was, Ezra Klein wrote this column maybe back in March or something, saying Biden should consider dropping out and having this emergency lever pulled at the convention. And he just linked to some videos comparing Biden's campaign announcement in 2020 versus 2024. And I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, even with this prepared speech, and even in 4 years, I mean, I watched some clips of the 2020 debate to prep for the debate. I'm like, oh, actually, Biden is like better than I thought in 2020, right? There is noticeable physical and mental decline, as you would expect, as an overwhelmingly, probabilistic prior. You would expect that to be true when someone goes from age 78 to 82 or 77 to 81. under the pressures, by the way, of the US presidency, not the
Yeah.
least stressful job in the world exactly. That's what you would expect. And it's like obvious. And like the fact that parts of the pundit class thought, oh, just a media fixation. It's like, no, it's the one unassailable fact in this
Yeah.
complex world that we live in is that this guy is too fucking old to be president. Now, the other guy tried to like start an insurrection on January 6th. So given those two things, I'm going to vote third party now in New York, which is not a swing state, right? If I were in Nevada, I would still hold my nose.
I'm voting Biden. Yes. If he, I
Okay.
hope I'm voting not Biden because I do hope he steps down, but I'm voting Democrat, obviously, across the board. Because I am in a swing state and my vote actually matters for the first time in my life. But, I think that people are so afraid, of being called ageist, et cetera, but this is not ageism, right? There is, and we're not saying that, oh my God, everyone over the age of 75 should be put to pasture. I have, my thesis advisor, my graduate advisor in grad school, Walter Michel, was in his 80s, right? And was one of the sharpest people I knew. And I became friends with one of his closest friends, Danny Kahneman, Nobel laureate, who was then in his 70s, sharp up until both of them sharp until their dying day, and incredibly sharp. You could have very deep debates, but first of all, they're in academia, right? They're not running for president. And the fact that there are exceptions doesn't mean that we should be looking at the data that's in front of us and saying, oh, but it's ageist, right? No, this goes for both of them, by the way. And you could see Trump, like, let's just say that Trump did decline throughout the debate. And you could see that someone at some point, I was looking at kind of Twitter feeds, and I don't remember who tweeted this, but someone said, oh, I now see the difference between 78 and 81. It's 45 minutes. And I thought that was pretty spot on, because Trump did start rambling and kind of losing it a little bit near the end. But people are going to, so let's talk about also how memory works from a psychology standpoint. People are going to remember the beginning, right? People, that first impression, people are going to remember how they performed when they turned on the television at the beginning. And that was abysmal. That was the worst moment for Biden. He had his kind of freezing moment. It was just like, at that point, that's game over. And a lot of people turned off the debate at that point as well, because they were like, I don't want to watch this. This is too depressing. I'm done. And that's not where you want to be. So I
think people have this experience where like, after the first 15 minutes and you began to see it reflected in like some market prices, like the price of Bitcoin and at prediction markets and things like that pretty quickly. Shout out to prediction markets. But like, yeah, look, I think a lot of people after the first 15 minutes, speaking for myself, kind of got lost in a series of conversations and texts and things like that and social media chatter and like, because there was no recovering from that point, right? Like, I mean, because it's like not, and this is why it's like, people are going to say, oh, well, Obama lost the first debate in 2012 and then came back to win. But there are a couple of things. When Obama lost the debate in a way that was much more easy to write off to being a one-off, arrogant, maybe performance. And second, Obama was ahead at the time that he lost that debate and not behind, so he could recover. Biden has been hidden in some ways from doing all the things that a president normally would do. He did not give a softball interview during the Super Bowl, for example, which every president has, even Trump did 3 times, and Biden did, I think, 2 years ago. So that wasn't a good sign. He has refused to give a sit-down interview with the New York Times, which has beef with Biden, but it is the most widely read publication among influential Democrats and influential people in general. And so why would you not want to let the New York Times grill you? He did not, more understandably in this case, did not want to debate Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson. But like, look, if you had had a primary, people say, well, if you'd had a primary, then Biden would have won. He's more popular than like Gavin Newsom or whatever. I'm not sure he would have won if he had even one of these debates. And the primary supposed to have like 6 or 7 debates, right? Yeah. The reason to have a primary would be to vet Biden and see, is he prepared for like the rigors of a campaign? And this is the first real test. And this has to be the worst general election performance in history in a debate. It can't be close.
No.
Michael Bloomberg, people forget how bad Michael Bloomberg. We probably have Bloomberg fans in the risky business audience. Interesting guy, accomplished a lot. Bloomberg was the next worst performance I've seen in a debate in 2020. And then there's a Marco Rubio thing here or there. It's probably in 3rd place, right? But like, this was like, again, the fact that like, if I had to pinpoint, because I'm hypersensitive to like calibrating what everyone thinks about everything on like Twitter and social media, right? If I had to like circle, here are 10 people that would never ever say that Biden should step down or that the debate's going badly, unless it's going really badly. Like 8 of those 10 people are like, this sucks. He needs to get out of
Yeah.
there. I mean, it's the elected officials and like Nancy Pelosi's haven't said very much yet, but like I don't know. The folks I was watching the debate with last night, we've talked about P Doom on this show, the
Yep.
probability of the world being destroyed by artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Should we talk about
The new
P-Doom
buzzword is-
presidency?
It's P drop. The probability that Biden will drop out at some point between now and the convention, or I guess technically now in November, the way those markets resolve. At Polymarket, before I began taping this, it was around 42% or something like that. Now, look, if Democratic delegates were free agents and they could do what they wanted, I think for sure they would not want Biden at this point. However, legally, Democratic delegates are bound to Joe Biden. So if Joe Biden wants the nomination, then, I mean, you could have some litigation and see what really happens. If he's like, seems like he's disabled or something, there's like the 25th Amendment or something, but like, basically Joe Biden has to agree to step down. And so there's kind of two levels, like, will there be some elder council of Democrats that comes up to him and says, Joe, you got to go.
Yep.
And then will he listen to that? I think it's more, well, let me be careful. I think it's 50-50. I would buy P drop at 42. And it was like 25% last night. I was telling people I'd buy that too, because like he doesn't have any answer to this argument. And the polls are going to come out in a week or two. And like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll only be behind. He's already behind to begin with, right? He's not going to gain in the polls, but the polls will come out. There's another freak out. If you watch what White House staffers do, if you begin to have some people leak or go public, give little tell-alls to the New Yorker or whatever else, then that could be damaging potentially.
Yeah.
We don't know what like Jill Biden and the Obamas will do and people like that. You could also have, Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, who are, I suppose, the two most likely replacements. Actually, in the reverse order, I think Kamala is quite a bit more likelier than Gavin Newsom, but we'll see. As someone, by the way, who think she's a very accomplished person, but a terrible politician, I'd still rather have her than Biden at this point. At least she's a blank slate. At least she has some upside. At least it's a fresh look, right? I would rather have Kamala Harris and increase my variance instead of have this seemingly losing, not inevitable, but like difficult path. They were being good foot soldiers for Biden and saying, well, when has a bad day now and then. I'm sure behind the scenes, though, people are like, it's going to be you, Kamala. Gavin, it's your moment, bro. I'm sure, because they're both very ambitious politicians, too.
Okay, so let's actually talk about that for a moment. Obviously, we both agree that at this point, Joe Biden should step down. That yesterday was kind of the nail in the coffin of our hopeful optimism that maybe he actually could perform. And I think it doesn't look like it's going to get better. And by the way, as we both keep saying, he might still win, right? And it's still incredibly risky. But let's assume that there is a council of elders. Like, let's just play out a hypothetical that he does decide, okay, fine, I will step down. What do we think kind of is the best path forward? I would love to kind of talk a little bit about kind of what those scenarios look like, whether it's Kamala, whether it's Gavin Newsom. Last night, as I texted to you, Mayor Pete ? Because I've seen Mayor Pete debate and he would have. Now, he is a debater. He is someone who would have wiped the floor with Trump in a setting like that. There are names of people who have followings, but who obviously have issues of their own. So what do we think? Like, what's a viable strategy going forward? Like, let's imagine that you and I get to advise the Democrats. Wouldn't that be awesome? What would we suggest?
Oh, I would hate to do that. No. Okay. What I would say is that I want some sort of open audition process in which there's some element of public feedback. So the primaries have happened. First of all, you have some time to work with. The Democratic convention begins in mid-August. So you have some time to work with. Look, in the ideal world, I would say that you should do some fact-finding first in terms of like how many people are interested in this potentially, right? And then maybe like literally have a debate. You can also, by the way, the primaries have happened. parties can schedule their own elections, which are called caucuses. They have to pay for it. But Democrats could say, let's pick 6 states that are demographically representative cross-section of the US, or the Democratic Party at least, right? Have this debate and then have a non-binding party-run caucus in these 6 states. We'll pay for it. We'll get some rich guys to pay for it, right? And that will help inform super delegates for what the public preference might be. And if the public preference is ambiguous, then maybe you default to Kamala out of some sense of she being the VP, obviously. But like, if you're going to take the drastic step of replacing the president, I don't think you want to tiptoe around the fact that Kamala Harris is also unpopular. And what's the point, right? If you're going to replace the president, I think she should have to fight for it, as she would have if Biden had said what he should have done a year and a half ago. I'm not going to run for a second term. No one would have handed the nomination to Kamala Harris. She would have had to earn it, and she might have earned it. Candidates get better sometimes in their second run for the White House. And there are attacks on her qualifications that I think sometimes are unfair. But I think you have to try to have some element of that process. And look, you're almost free because I don't think any of this is above 50%, right? I mean, it's a matter of are you cashing in your 40% equity instead of 20%? Or I'm not sure where I'm getting these estimates. They're off the cuff, but so in some ways you can afford to have a riskier process almost and playing it too safe. But the sooner and the more organized a Biden dropout would be, then the better it is, right? If it's the case that there's one path that looks something like the polls are bad, but not quite as bad as we're thinking they're going to be, and then Biden holds on, and then in early August there's some disastrous press conference, and then it's truly untenable, right? And then it kind of has to be chaos at the convention, right? Right now there is just enough time to get some sense for even just in polls. Although remember, someone like a Kamala Harris is much better known than a Gretchen Whitmer or something like that. But some type of open audition process, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think an open audition process sounds good, if provided it happens right now, because I think that what we want to avoid is a total shit show in August, right? Where there is no unified consensus about who should be the nominee. Because I do think that at this point, because it's so late in the game and people are fragmented, and this is an unprecedented, incredibly risky move, there does need to be a united front, and people do need to rally around one candidate as kind of the choice and the person who's going to get kind of the support and who's going to be able to represent well. So I do think that this needs to happen sooner rather than later. Otherwise, I think it might end up being a risk that just is sure it can't be worse than Biden, but the chances of winning are going to be lower because that, any cracks kind of in that front are going to be exploited. We've seen that, the Republican Party is very good at exploiting cracks, and there are a lot of undecided voters who look at something like the debate yesterday and don't know that Trump is actually lying his face off in every single sentence, and look at these two people and say, you know what, I'd rather have the guy on the left than the guy on the right, because he's just making more sense to me. And what is it that he said about immigrants, taking my jobs and killing people? I don't want that, right? There are a lot of people who aren't going to do that secondary fact checking, so you need someone to do it who's able to kind of do it in real time, someone who is able to rebuff and actually kind of show Trump for what he is. The other thing in my mind, though, is, last time Trump won, he ran against Hillary Clinton, and one of the reasons that he was able to win is because she was very qualified but unpopular, and didn't run a good campaign. And I think a lot of people didn't want to vote for a female. As a female, I was definitely tuned into that. So I think there is kind of it's a little bit risky to put a Kamala Harris or a Gretchen in there because, once again, he'll be running against a woman. And I don't know if that's the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump.
Look, I'm not sure it's Gavin Newsom either, who
No.
is not terribly popular himself and will have a lot of problems associated with the state of California, which is losing population and all those things, right? I mean, he looks good in a suit, I suppose. Look, Democrats actually have, I think, a reasonably talented bench of candidates. They did very well in both the 2018 and 2022 midterms, which is kind of where you get your bench from. I mean, someone more unknown like Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, for example, could be potentially a compelling candidate. J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, the governor of Illinois, is this big guy, and kind of when Trump got convicted, kind of gave a very old school Chicago style like takedown of Trump that I think could play well against Trump's bluster. Because the thing is, like, Trump is not that popular either.
Yeah.
His popularity has actually improved a little bit. And in some ways, if we're being honest, I think he's run a better campaign compared to 4 years ago, and gave a better debate performance than the 5 previous ones he's had against Biden or Clinton. So I don't think Trump is easy to defeat, but there have been voters clamoring for a long time that, like, can you please not nominate these fucking 2 people again in a country of 330 whatever million people? Can you please not nominate these 2 guys? It's like really the best you have to offer. And there is some upside chance that, like, a newer kind of fresher Democrat. I mean, I don't know, right? But like, I mean, the reason why, like, I don't know that Democratic Party elders are going to be able to agree on some consensus choice if Kamala Harris were a little bit more popular, and people were more confident in her quote unquote electability, then she would be the obvious choice. But if she were the obvious choice, I'm not sure Biden would have run in the first place for a second term. So I don't think there's an obvious choice, and therefore to have some public feedback as a coordination mechanism. Oh, one more point, by the way, that is important. The delegates at the convention are delegates chosen by Joe Biden, right? You actually pick your delegates and say, I want Maria and Nate to be my delegates if I win this nominating contest in New Jersey or whatever. Therefore, they are loyal to what Biden would do, but it also means they're probably more moderate, centrist, pragmatic Democrats, right? That makes things a little easier because there's like not an appreciable like left-wing faction among the superdelegates. And that might increase the ease, relatively speaking, of the coordination problem.
Well, I think that's a rare hopeful point in today's podcast, which has not been very hopeful. I wish that you and I would be able to come up with a nice little roadmap and be like, okay, done, 40 minutes and we've saved democracy. Good job, us. But it's obviously not that easy. This is an incredibly complicated situation. And I feel I was about to say I feel slightly better after talking to you, but that's not actually true. I feel just as despondent as I did before, but I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk this through and to talk through some of kind of the big issues, the big psychological issues. And there are obviously psychological issues for the voters too, in terms of swapping out Biden right now. So I think that's, these are all things that we'll need to revisit. And I'm really interested to see kind of what the actual response is going to be in the next few weeks. I would say P drop is actually probably lower than the prediction markets have them right now, because ego. And, Biden clearly has a lot of it. And he doesn't want to drop out. And he's surrounded by people who've been shielding him and who've been saying, you did such a great job last night. Good job.
I don't know how many people were saying that. I mean, the emperor has no, I mean, the reason why like parables like the emperor has no clothes is because like people actually act like that.
Exactly. So we're in the middle of the emperor has no clothes. And I really hope that the emperor realizes he's naked, and is willing to take a seat and let someone else come out. I don't know if that will happen though. Nate, what's your personal P drop? Is it higher or lower than the prediction markets have it right now?
A little higher, I think, because of the degree of unanimity among the kind of political and pundit class. And look, in 2020, the kind of Democratic elites came together in this messy nomination process where it looked like Bernie Sanders might win. and like literally all got together. They all flew somewhere, and like Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar dropped out and endorsed Biden, right? And James Clyburn, the very influential congressman who is maybe the most admired Black Democrat, endorsed Biden, and he kind of zoomed from kind of this muddle in like second place to winning actually very easily on South Carolina and in Super Tuesday. So it is a group that has shown itself capable of making adult kind of group decisions. And again, the problem is that like you can hit this story about Biden's age every single day, however many days are left, 100 and something, whatever, in the campaign. Because first of all, he's behind in most of these polls, and he's not going to like pull ahead after this, at least, right? So every time a poll comes out, you can be like, okay, the new New York Times Siena poll has Biden 4 points down in Pennsylvania, a must-win state. You know, that seems really bad. Every time Biden has a public speaking appearance, where it goes mediocre at best and disastrous at worst, it's going to be a point of debate. And believe me, if Democrats and the media forget to talk about it, the Republican attack ads are going to be devastating. And, you know, just the before and after clips of Biden then versus Biden now. And there's a cascading effects, I think. And, you know, there's also, by the way, there are also opportunistic effects. I don't think that Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or whoever else, Raphael Warnock, would face the same degree of stigma if they said, if needed, I will serve, right? I mean, they'd be subtle about it and coy about it. Newsom, by the way, was not very coy about his intentions to potentially challenge Biden 2 years ago. But like there are opportunists who could say that like, I am willing to serve, or, I mean, you know, someone could say that they want to vote, register as a third party. That probably wouldn't work because it's too late to collect enough signatures in certain states. But yeah, if you needed to, you could kind of poison pill Biden, right? You could like threaten to leak unflattering things that would ensure that he would lose. And so therefore he's forced to resign.
That's another risky strategy.
Well, look, I mean, you know, what's the burning your bridges strategy? Yeah. But like, I think the degree of elite consensus and Democrats are the party of elites, at least by one definition of the term, is so strong. And there are not very many ways to undo that because Biden just isn't capable of it, right?
Yeah.
He isn't capable of it. Schedule another debate next week. How about that? Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And we'll see how you do.
Yeah.
Another debate. And we'll see how you do. Maybe that would allay nerves. But like, you're not going to let people wait until September to have another debate.
And by the way, even if we have another debate tomorrow and he does much better, that's still not going to assuage my fear because, as I said, I need someone who consistently can perform under pressure and under the lights. That's not consistency. That's good days and bad days. What if we're on a bad day when there's a nuclear strike, right? Like we cannot afford that in a president. So, you know, I think our headline for today's podcast is we thought we were fucked and we're kind of fucked. But, you know, let's tune in a few weeks and see where we are and see what happens. And I hope that, you know, people listening to this and listening to the unanimity of voices will actually finally do something about it. And we'll be in a better situation, or at least a situation where variance is on our side, when we next revisit this topic.
Also, you know, again, I'm trying to come at this from a little bit more of a nonpartisan lens, although I've said I don't think Trump would make a good leader and I don't want him to become president again. America, stop fucking voting for these really fucking old guys, right? You should age discriminate more. Do not fucking vote for people who were 75 years or older to be the fucking president of the United States, the hardest job in the world. I would propose a constitutional amendment to say you cannot begin your presidential term past the age of 75. In the absence of that, I am pledging, Maria, that I will never vote for somebody age 75 or older again for president. I'm pledging that.
Good. I will pledge that with you. And I've actually often thought that since we have a younger limit on the presidency, we should have an older limit as well. So Nate, we can do the Nate Silver and Maria Konnikova amendment to make sure this doesn't happen again. I think that's a great call to action for the end of our show today. Thanks for joining me on this emergency pod. I appreciate your time in this emergency time.
For listeners, next week we'll have an interview that we have pre-recorded with a special guest, unless there is more emergency news, which there very well might be.
Yes, in which case you'll get the two of us again. All right. Thanks for listening, guys.